who helps a stranger, only to discover she's been helping one of the most powerful men in the city. Cassandra Wood thought she was just being kind when she offered directions to a man who looked like he'd lost his way. But nothing about him was as it seemed. A torn backpack, a scruffy beard, a secret that could change both their lives forever. One simple gesture, one hidden identity, and one story that proves even the richest heart longs to be seen for who they really are. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. The rain had just stopped when Cassandra Wood looked up from wiping the coffee counter at Bean Bloom Coffee House. Through the foggy window, she noticed a man standing outside, his posture weary, his hair damp and messy, his sneakers stained with mud. He clutched a torn backpack that looked like it had survived several disasters. For a second, Cassandra thought about pretending not to see him. The place was closing in 10 minutes, but something in the way he hesitated before pushing the door open tugged at her heart. "Hey there," she greeted as he stepped inside, bringing in the crisp scent of rain and pine. "Evening," he said, his voice deeper and kinder than she'd expected. He glanced around as if unsure if he belonged. "Kitchen's closed, but I can make you a coffee." "On the house?" David Bates nodded, lowering his backpack to the floor. "That would be great. Thank you." Cassandra tried not to stare as she worked the machine. His beard looked like it hadn't met a razor in weeks, his clothes were worn, but his eyes, there was something striking about them. Intelligent. Observant. Not quite what you'd expect from someone who looked like he'd spent a week lost in the woods. "You passing through?" she asked, handing him the steaming cup. "Something like that," David replied, taking a grateful sip. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "If you need a place to stay, there's a hostel 2 blocks over. Safe, cheap, clean enough. I can give you directions." David almost smiled. "That's kind of you." "And if you're short on cash," Cassandra reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a crumpled $10 bill. "For a sandwich. You look like you could use one." He blinked, caught off guard by the gesture. It had been a long time since someone offered him something without wanting anything in return. "I appreciate it," he said softly. "But I'm fine. Really." She shrugged, sliding the bill across the counter anyway. "No one's fine after hiking through the Cascades in sneakers like that." David couldn't help but laugh. Cassandra joined in, the sound filling the quiet cafe. They chatted a few minutes more about the rain, the city, the best place for cheap soup. And then, when he left, Cassandra watched through the window as he adjusted his backpack and headed toward Cascade Royale Hotel, the very place she could never dream of affording a room in, but the place where, unknown to her, he actually owned every inch of marble and glass. David paused outside the grand entrance. Security nodded him through, not recognizing him in his current state. He stepped into the lobby, the scent of polished wood and expensive cologne hitting him all at once. "Sir?" The night receptionist, young, tense, stepped forward. David smiled. "Just need a room." The clerk eyed his clothes, clearly debating how to handle the situation. "Sir, our rooms start at $400 a night." "No problem." David handed over a black card, worn from use but limitless in balance. A pause. A double take. The card went through, of course. "Presidential suite," David added with a wink. The clerk's hands shook as he passed over the key card. "Enjoy your stay, sir." In the elevator, David looked at his reflection. The scruff, the tired eyes, the mud. And then he thought of Cassandra's kindness. That brief, genuine concern. Not for his wealth, she didn't know. Just for him. He smiled. The next morning, Cassandra's shift at Bean Bloom was filled with the usual chaos of pre-work caffeine seekers. But all she could think about was the man from last night. The rain, the mud, the mysterious kindness in his eyes. When her break finally came, she stepped outside and looked up at Cascade Royale. "Probably halfway to the next city by now," she muttered. Inside the hotel, David Bates was showered, shaved, suited. But he couldn't forget the girl with the $10 bill. David Bates had never enjoyed being recognized for his wealth. For years, people had smiled at his name, his company, his fortune, but rarely at him. That's what made Cassandra Wood unforgettable. He decided that morning, between meetings and emails, to find a way to see her again. But not as David Bates the billionaire, as the man she'd shown kindness to. Meanwhile, Cassandra wiped down tables at Bean Bloom, trying to focus on work. The city bustled outside. Tourists, locals, businesspeople rushing to and fro. She'd never imagined she'd spend her days serving coffee and scones, but life had its turns. A soft voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Excuse me." She looked up and froze. There he was. Cleaner now, a hair combed, beard trimmed, wearing jeans and a simple jacket, but the same man. "You clean up nice," she said, surprised by her own boldness. David grinned. "Figured I owed you a proper thank you." "You don't owe me anything." "Maybe not, but I wanted to invite you to dinner." "As thanks." "Just dinner." Cassandra hesitated. "Not the fancy place," he added quickly. "I heard there's a taco truck near Rainier Green that's worth standing in line for." That made her laugh. "All right, taco truck it is." They met that evening under the park's ancient trees, the city lights flickering like distant stars. The taco truck's lines snaked down the sidewalk. David ordered with confidence. Cassandra watched him, amused. "You sure you don't want the presidential tacos?" she teased. David smirked. "I hear these are better." They sat on a bench, unwrapping their food, laughing about the salsa's unexpected heat. "You don't talk like someone just passing through," Cassandra said after a while. "Maybe I'm not," David admitted. And then, gently, the conversation turned, about books, dreams, how she wanted to one day open a bookstore cafe, a haven for readers and writers. David listened, captivated. "You should," he said. "Open it." "With what money?" Cassandra laughed. "I'd have to win the lottery first." "Maybe luck's closer than you think," David murmured. She raised a brow. "You're mysterious, you know that?" "I get that a lot." The next day, David found himself wandering into Cascade Outfitters. If he was going to keep up this game, he'd need clothes that didn't scream boardroom billionaire. Stephen Parks, a cheerful salesman, approached. "Looking for anything in particular?" David smiled. "Something that says normal guy but doesn't itch." Stephen chuckled. "Got it." By afternoon, David wore jeans that didn't cost as much as a used car and boots that actually fit the city streets. That evening, he and Cassandra walked through Rainier Green again, this time with ice cream. "I feel like I should be teaching you something," she joked. "You already are." "What's that?" David hesitated. "How to be seen." She looked at him, puzzled. But before she could ask, he pointed at a food stand. "Ever tried those pretzels?" Days slipped by like pages in a well-loved book, and soon David Bates found himself eagerly awaiting evenings in Rainier Green, cups of coffee at Bean Bloom, and walks along Seattle's busy streets, always beside Cassandra Wood. She didn't ask many questions about his past or his future, which suited him perfectly. He felt seen without being exposed, understood without explanation. One afternoon, Cassandra invited him to Lantern Quill Books, her favorite hideaway in the city. It was cozy, with creaking wooden floors and shelves packed with novels, memoirs, and poetry. Harold Foster, the shop's elderly owner, greeted them warmly. "Cassie, who's your friend?" Harold peered at David over round glasses. "A fellow reader," Cassandra replied with a grin. David shook Harold's hand, feeling instantly comfortable in this modest haven of words. They browsed aisles together, Cassandra picking out titles and explaining each choice with enthusiasm. "This one taught me resilience," she said, holding up a novel worn from multiple reads. "And this one a hope." David watched her, fascinated. "Books were your teachers?" "Always." Cassandra smiled softly. "Stories make us braver, don't you think?" "They certainly can." She glanced sideways at him. "What's your favorite book, anyway?" David paused, suddenly aware how long it had been since anyone asked him something so personal. "A tale about second chances," he finally answered. "About discovering who you really are beneath everything else." "That's quite specific," Cassandra teased. "You'll have to lend it to me sometime." I will. Outside, rain began again, Seattle's familiar drizzle wrapping the city in mist. They dashed through it laughing, the moment feeling oddly perfect. When David returned to Bates International HQ the following morning, he barely recognized his reflection. The tailored suits felt stiffer now, the polished shoes tighter. Daniel Cruz, his CFO, caught him in the elevator, looking concerned. "Are you all right, David?" David nodded. "Better than ever." Daniel seemed skeptical but didn't press. "The merger meeting is at noon. Representatives from Ocean Ember are joining. I'll be there." The meeting room buzzed with anticipation. Executives chatted about profits, margins, and expansion. But David's mind wandered back to Bean Bloom, Rainier Green, Lantern Quill books. He considered Cassandra, her laughter, her kindness, her dreams. For once, discussions about bottom lines felt hollow. Midway through the meeting, his phone buzzed. Cassandra's name lit up the screen. "Dinner?" the message asked simply. Smiling quietly, David typed back, "Absolutely." That evening, Cassandra led him to a small diner overlooking Puget Sound. She was quieter, thoughtful. "Everything all right?" he asked. "I'm worried about you," she admitted, stirring her coffee. "You never say much about yourself. Where you came from, where you're going. Is that important?" "Maybe not." She looked directly into his eyes. "But everyone has a story." He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Mine's complicated. I've read complicated books." David laughed softly. "I promise I'll tell you someday." She nodded slowly. "Fair enough." After dinner, walking along the waterfront beneath flickering street lamps, Cassandra shivered slightly. Without thinking, David slipped off his jacket and placed it around her shoulders. She looked up, startled. "It suits you," he said quietly. "It's nicer than I expected." She touched the fabric curiously, sensing its quality. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Wait, Cass, don't overthink it," he quickly intervened. "Just let me enjoy being chivalrous." She smiled reluctantly. "All right, but I'll figure you out eventually." "You probably will," David murmured, sensing their comfortable mystery couldn't last forever. The next morning, Cassandra stood behind the counter at Bean Bloom, her thoughts drifting again to the mysterious man who'd quietly become so important to her. A customer interrupted her reverie. "You seen this?" Jessica Miller, her best friend and co-worker, waved her phone. "Billionaire David Bates spotted downtown yesterday. Right by Cascade Outfitters." Cassandra glanced at the blurry photo. Her pulse quickened. The man in the photo wore familiar clothing, the same casual jeans, the same jacket. "Jess," Cassandra asked slowly, "how much do you know about David Bates?" Jessica laughed. "Rich, powerful, owns half the city." "Why?" "No reason," Cassandra murmured, heart thumping loudly. But suddenly 1,000 little details clicked into place, his vague answers, the expensive clothes disguised as ordinary, the places they visited. And with a sinking realization, she understood exactly who she'd been spending her evenings with. Across town, David sat in his penthouse suite at Cascade Royale Hotel, unaware his careful balance of truth and fiction was about to unravel spectacularly. Cassandra's shift felt unbearably long. Every moment dragged, as though the world was deliberately slowing down, giving her plenty of time to replay each conversation with David Bates, billionaire and owner of the very hotel towering nearby. When her shift ended, she stood outside Bean Bloom, gazing up at Cascade Royale. The grand hotel seemed different now, imposing, unreachable, a fortress of marble and glass that mocked her naivete. She inhaled deeply and made a decision. Minutes later, she stood in the hotel's pristine lobby, feeling distinctly out of place in her casual clothes and worn sneakers. Richard Evans, the hotel's general manager, noticed her immediately and approached politely. "May I help you, miss?" Cassandra hesitated. "I'm looking for David Bates." Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mr. Bates? Do you have an appointment?" "Tell him Cassandra Wood is here. He'll want to see me." Richard's expression shifted subtly. "One moment, please." Upstairs, David was reviewing financial reports when his phone buzzed. "Sir, there's a Cassandra Wood downstairs for you," Richard informed him carefully. David felt a sudden, uncomfortable tightening in his chest. "Send her up, please." The elevator ride seemed endless. Cassandra felt her heartbeat in her ears. When the doors opened, David stood waiting in the hallway, eyes cautious, guarded. "You lied to me," she said quietly, stepping out to face him directly. He sighed, defeated. "Cass, I can explain." "You're David Bates," she interrupted sharply, voice trembling. "The David Bates? And you let me believe you were someone else. I never intended to humiliate me?" Her voice rose with emotion. "How amusing it must have been, watching me give money for sandwiches to a billionaire." "No, Cass," David said, stepping forward gently. "That was real. You were real." She shook her head, fighting tears. "How could anything between us be real? You own half this city. I make coffee for people who probably work for you. Your kindness mattered more than anything I own," he insisted softly. "You treated me like a person. You have no idea how rare that is." She closed her eyes, struggling to breathe evenly. "I don't know who you really are. And now I don't know if I ever did." "Cassu." "No," she said firmly, stepping back into the elevator. "This was a mistake." The doors closed quietly, leaving David alone in silence. Over the next few days, the city felt different. Places Cassandra loved, Lantern Quill, Rainier Green, even Bean Bloom, seemed colored by memories of David. Worse, her confrontation had made her unexpectedly famous overnight. Clips from the hotel's security footage had somehow leaked online, and soon her argument with David in the Cascade Royale lobby became viral fodder. "Seattle woman discovers secret billionaire boyfriend," headlines declared dramatically. Jessica tried comforting her, but Cassandra felt exposed, betrayed, and utterly lost. Meanwhile, David's world, typically stable and predictable, turned upside down. Media outlets bombarded Bates' International HQ with interview requests. Daniel Cruz, his CFO, entered his office cautiously. "David, shareholders are getting restless. This negative press isn't helping." David rubbed his forehead wearily. "It'll pass, Daniel." "Will it?" Daniel asked carefully. "I've never seen you so distracted. Is this woman worth it?" David met Daniel's gaze firmly. "She's worth everything." Daniel hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Then make it right. You've always been able to fix things. Do it again." Inspired by his words, David began formulating a plan, something genuine, personal, away from the noise and lights. He knew one grand gesture wouldn't heal Cassandra's hurt, but perhaps sincerity could bridge the gap. A week later, Cassandra opened Lantern Quill books to find Harold waiting anxiously. "You have a visitor," Harold whispered, eyes wide with intrigue. Stepping into the back room, Cassandra stopped abruptly. David sat on a stool, dressed simply, looking vulnerable and earnest. Before she could speak, he began quietly. "I know I hurt you. I was selfish, careless with your trust. But meeting you was the best thing that's ever happened to me, Cass." She crossed her arms protectively, her voice barely audible. "How do I know this isn't another game? Because from now on, there won't be secrets. No hidden identities." He placed a thick envelope gently on the table beside him. "This is for you." Suspiciously, Cassandra opened it. Inside were detailed blueprints, legal documents, and financial plans, all for a bookstore cafe. Exactly the kind she'd once described to him. Her throat tightened. "What is this?" "Your dream," David answered softly. "Fully yours. No strings. If you never want to see me again, I'll respect that completely. But please take it." She stared at the plans, trembling slightly. This was everything she'd dreamed of, everything she'd quietly believed impossible. Finally, she met his eyes. "I don't want your money." David smiled sadly. "I know. But maybe this isn't about money. Maybe it's about believing in your dream, just as you believed in mine, the dream of being seen as more than a wallet, more than a company, more than my name." Cassandra stood frozen, torn between suspicion and hope. He rose slowly, his expression gentle. "I'll leave you to decide. But please know every moment I spent with you was real. Every conversation. Every laugh. You made me remember who I was beneath all the layers. With that, he turned quietly and left the bookstore, the bell above the door jingling softly. Cassandra sank onto the stool, surrounded by plans and documents, possibilities she never imagined could truly be hers. She traced her fingers lightly over the blueprints, her heart finally daring to hope again. Cassandra spent hours poring over the papers David had left behind. The bookstore cafe was precisely as she'd imagined: cozy reading nooks, vintage shelves, and a small stage for local poets. Every detail felt personal, sincere, a gesture far deeper than money alone could ever convey. Jessica found Cassandra late that evening, still sitting at Lantern Quill, eyes glazed from reading and rereading the plans. So, Jessica began carefully, has Seattle's mysterious billionaire finally lost his villain status? Cassandra sighed, shaking her head slightly. I still can't believe he did this. Rich people can afford to be dramatic, Jessica joked, flipping through pages herself. But honestly, Cass, maybe he really means it. Cassandra stayed silent, conflicted. Meanwhile, at Cascade Royale Hotel, David paced his suite restlessly. He'd faced down international business magnates, complex mergers, and boardroom battles, but nothing felt as daunting as waiting to see if Cassandra would forgive him. The next morning, Cassandra entered Bean Bloom Coffee House as usual, but everything felt different. Customers whispered, recognizing her from viral videos, casting furtive glances filled with curiosity. Tony Brooks, head of security from Cascade Royale, dropped by, quietly ordering coffee. Ms. Wood, Tony began carefully, Mr. Bates wanted me to check in. Make sure you're not being bothered by the media. Cassandra smiled faintly. Tell him I'm fine. But also tell him he doesn't have to send you here. Tony nodded respectfully. Understood. At lunchtime, Cassandra gathered her courage and walked back toward Cascade Royale. Standing outside, heart hammering in her chest, she hesitated. Before she could change her mind, the lobby doors opened and Richard Evans appeared. Miss Wood, he greeted softly. He's upstairs if you're looking for him. Nervously, she followed Richard into the elevator. Each floor that passed increased her anxiety, questions swirling inside her. What if David had moved on? What if this was a mistake? At his suite door, Richard nodded politely and withdrew. Cassandra knocked quietly, breath caught in her throat. David opened the door, visibly surprised but hopeful. Hi, she said softly. Cass, he breathed. Please come in. Stepping inside, Cassandra glanced around. The lavish suite no longer intimidated her, it felt oddly personal now, a place where a friend, not a billionaire, lived. She faced him directly. I spent all night thinking about your gift. He waited silently, afraid to speak. It's exactly what I dreamed, she admitted. But David tensed. If I take it, I want it to be a partnership, she said clearly. Not charity. I don't want a gift from David Bates, billionaire. I want to build it with David, the man who ate tacos in Rainier Green. The one I thought I knew. Relief flooded his face. That's all I ever wanted. They stood in quiet relief, the tension easing between them. One condition, Cassandra added lightly. No more secrets. David smiled genuinely. Agreed. Ask me anything. Did you really like the taco truck? He laughed warmly. Honestly, best food I've had in years. They sat together, laughing softly, bridging gaps, rebuilding trust with careful words and tentative smiles. Outside, Seattle moved forward, unaware of the quiet reconciliation happening high above its busy streets. Over the next few weeks, Cassandra and David quietly planned the bookstore cafe, working as equals. They visited Lantern Quill often, involving Harold in their plans, who delightedly gave advice on book selections and cafe menus. The viral attention from their initial drama slowly faded, replaced by new headlines. Soon, they were no longer interesting as gossip fodder, simply becoming a regular couple with an unusual story. One afternoon, walking along Rainier Green, David stopped abruptly. Cass, there's something important I haven't shown you yet. Curious, Cassandra followed as he led her toward Bates International HQ. The sleek skyscraper loomed impressively above, intimidating yet fascinating. "You ready?" David asked gently. She nodded, heart quickening as they stepped into the elevator and ascended to the top floor. Entering his office, she was immediately struck by its simplicity, a sharp contrast to the opulence she'd anticipated. On his desk lay a stack of coupons, clippings, and handwritten notes. "What are these?" she asked, amused. He smiled sheepishly. "Savings tips you gave me. I've been using them. The sandwich coupons are especially useful." She laughed, shaking her head fondly. "You're ridiculous." He stepped closer, suddenly serious. "You changed how I see things, Cass. I thought money defined everything until I met you." She looked up, holding his gaze. "And you reminded me dreams aren't impossible." Their moment was interrupted by Daniel Cruz entering cautiously. "David, oh sorry. I didn't mean it." "It's all right, Daniel," David reassured. "Meet Cassandra Wood." Daniel smiled warmly, genuinely pleased. "It's an honor, Cassandra. You've had quite an influence around here." She blushed lightly. "I hope it's been positive." "Extremely," Daniel confirmed, handing David a report. "Savings initiatives inspired by you have already had impressive results." Cassandra stared in disbelief. "Really?" David nodded proudly. "You inspired me more than you know." As Daniel exited, David turned back to her. "This office, the company, it's all part of my life, but it's not who I am. Not entirely. Thanks for reminding me of that." She took his hand gently. "Maybe we remind each other." Outside, the sun began to set, bathing Seattle in amber and rose hues. From their vantage point, everything seemed clearer, simpler. That evening, as they walked home through Rainier Green, Cassandra leaned comfortably against David. The world felt calm again, and for once, both of them believed that dreams, even complicated ones, really could come true. Months later, Cassandra stood proudly inside her new bookstore cafe, appropriately named Chapters. Soft lights illuminated comfortable reading areas, the scent of fresh coffee mingled warmly with pages of new and antique books. Everything was exactly as she dreamed. The opening day buzzed with excitement. Harold Foster stood proudly by the poetry section, recommending his favorites to curious visitors. Jessica Miller manned the coffee counter, cheerfully explaining menu specials. Even Tony Brooks from Cascade Royale dropped by, smiling warmly and congratulating Cassandra. In one cozy corner, David watched quietly, contentedly observing Cassandra's happiness. The transformation he'd witnessed, both in himself and Cassandra, was nothing short of miraculous. A reporter from a local paper approached Cassandra, notebook in hand. "Miss Wood, is it true the cafe was funded by billionaire David Bates?" Cassandra glanced toward David, who shrugged playfully from across the room. She smiled calmly at the reporter. "David and I built it together. Equal partners. The idea was mine, the realization ours." The reporter nodded, scribbling notes. "And what inspired such collaboration?" Cassandra considered her words carefully. "Maybe kindness, or the realization that labels like rich or poor mean very little compared to genuine connection." Later that evening, as guests departed and the cafe emptied, Cassandra joined David near the window, overlooking Seattle's softly glowing streets. "You handled that reporter well," David praised. She laughed lightly. "I've gotten used to their questions." "Are you happy?" he asked, suddenly serious. "More than I've ever been," she replied truthfully, turning to face him directly. "But it's not just the cafe, David. It's us." He reached out gently, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I never imagined a simple act of kindness could change everything." "It wasn't just kindness," she whispered. "It was honesty, even when it hurt." He nodded thoughtfully. "You've taught me honesty might be the greatest wealth anyone can have." She laughed softly. Wise words from Seattle's secret philosopher Billionaire. Their laughter faded into comfortable silence, as the city hummed quietly beneath them, its distant lights glittering like hopeful promises. The next morning, Cassandra opened chapters early, savoring the quiet before customers arrived. She adjusted a book display carefully when the door jingled unexpectedly. A young girl entered timidly, clutching a worn notebook. "Hi," Cassandra greeted warmly. "Can I help you?" The girl hesitated. "Are you Cassandra Wood, the lady who opened this cafe?" "That's me," Cassandra answered gently. The girl smiled shyly. "I read about you. They said you made your dreams real, even though it was hard." Cassandra's heart warmed instantly. "What's your dream?" The girl brightened, holding out the notebook. "I write stories. Maybe someday, people could read them here." Cassandra smiled warmly. "Absolutely. What's your name?" "Lily." "Well, Lily, I'll tell you what. When your story's ready, bring it here. It'll have a place in chapters. Promise." Lily beamed. "Thank you, Miss Cassandra." As Lily left, Jessica appeared from behind the counter, grinning. "Already inspiring Seattle's future writers? Just paying it forward." Cassandra laughed softly. Across town at Bates International HQ, David sat in his office, reviewing reports Daniel Cruz had prepared. Savings initiatives, inspired by Cassandra's humble advice, had transformed company culture, sparking innovation and surprising productivity boosts. Daniel entered quietly. "Ready for your next meeting, David?" David glanced up, smiling calmly. "Let's get it done." As he followed Daniel into the boardroom, David reflected how different these meetings felt now. Less about power, more about purpose. Cassandra's influence had quietly reshaped him, reminding him business was not just about wealth but meaningful impact. That evening, David returned to chapters. He found Cassandra stacking books, her face alight with contentment. "I met someone interesting today," she told him, recounting Lily's visit. "You've become a role model," David noted proudly. "I prefer friend," she laughed softly. Together, they sat in a quiet corner, sipping coffee. David glanced around thoughtfully. "Ever regret it?" he asked suddenly. "What? Helping a scruffy stranger in Bean Bloom months ago?" She smiled, shaking her head. "Not even once." He relaxed visibly. "Good." She nudged him lightly. "What about you? Regrets about pretending to be a backpacker?" David chuckled warmly. "Honestly, none. It led me straight to you." Their fingers entwined naturally across the table, contentment settling comfortably between them. Outside, Seattle carried on, unaware of the quiet magic unfolding within chapters. Weeks later, a formal invitation arrived at Chapters. Cascade Royale Hotel was hosting a major charity gala, and both Cassandra and David were invited as honored guests. "You planned this," Cassandra teased. David shook his head, bemused. "Actually, I didn't. Daniel and Richard organized it." "Should we go?" he considered. "Only if you promise to save me from boring small talk." She laughed. "I promise." On gala night, stepping into the Cascade Royale ballroom, Cassandra marveled at the transformation. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, elegantly dressed guests mingled gracefully. David stood beside her, supportive and calm. Richard Evans approached warmly. "Cassandra, David, welcome. Thank you both for coming." Daniel Cruz soon joined, smiling broadly. "David, the guests can't stop asking about your new saving strategies. Cassandra, you've officially revolutionized corporate Seattle." She blushed. "I only shared what I knew." Daniel chuckled. "Sometimes simple wisdom is the most powerful." As the evening progressed, Cassandra noticed many guests discreetly watching them. But now she felt no discomfort. Instead, she stood proudly beside David, confident in her place. When the host called David to the stage, Cassandra was surprised. He smiled reassuringly, stepping forward gracefully. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began calmly, "I've been fortunate enough to learn valuable lessons recently. Lessons not about money or success, but humanity, humility, and genuine kindness." The room quieted respectfully. "Tonight, I pledge a portion of Bates' international profits to literacy programs, bookstores, and small businesses inspired by my partner, Cassandra Wood." Cassandra's heart skipped. "Partner?" David glanced toward her, eyes shining sincerely. "Cass, your kindness taught me the true meaning of wealth." "Thank you." Applause filled the room, genuine and warm. Cassandra's eyes stung with happy tears. Beside her, Jessica nudged her gently. "Told you he was worth it." Later, standing quietly outside the ballroom, David took Cassandra's hands gently. "Surprised?" "Very," she admitted softly. "I meant every word," he assured. "You've changed my life, Cass." She smiled gently, heart swelling. "And you've changed mine." He leaned closer, voice gentle and sincere. "I love you, Cassandra." She met his gaze clearly, openly. "I love you too." Beneath Seattle's glittering skyline, two hearts found their way home. In the weeks following the gala, Seattle seemed to embrace the story of Cassandra and David with quiet pride. The bookstore cafe, Chapters, blossomed into a beloved spot, frequented by book lovers, hopeful writers, and dreamers who saw in Cassandra proof that kindness and perseverance could lead to extraordinary things. One chilly afternoon, Cassandra was organizing a poetry reading at Chapters when Lily, the aspiring young writer, returned shyly, manuscript in hand. "I finished it," Lily announced softly, cheeks flushed with excitement. Cassandra smiled warmly, accepting the carefully bound pages. "I can't wait to read it." Lily glanced around the cafe with quiet awe. "Do you think it could really end up here?" Cassandra placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "Absolutely. Every good story deserves a chance." After Lily left, Harold Foster watched fondly from behind his book stack. "You're giving dreams a home, Cassie." She sighed contentedly. "Isn't that what bookstores should do?" Later that day, David visited Chapters, bringing coffee from Bean Bloom. He found Cassandra sitting by the window, engrossed in Lily's manuscript. "Another bestseller?" he asked playfully, setting down the coffee cups. "Perhaps," she smiled, looking up. "She's talented." He sat across from her, studying her thoughtfully. "Do you realize how many lives you've changed just by being yourself?" She blushed softly. "It still feels surreal." "Your sincerity inspires people," he said earnestly. "Especially me." She took his hand gently, savoring their quiet connection amid the bookstore's warmth. "I couldn't have done any of this without your help, David." He shook his head slightly. "All I did was give you the chance you deserved. You created this." She squeezed his hand, grateful for his quiet strength. "We created it together." Outside, the city bustled, but within Chapters, calm settled comfortably between them, a peaceful reprieve from the world's constant motion. A few days later, Cassandra stood nervously in front of a large classroom at a Seattle community college. She'd been invited as a guest speaker to share her unusual journey from coffeehouse waitress to bookstore cafe owner. Faces watched her eagerly, young students filled with dreams of their own. "My story," Cassandra began honestly, "isn't special because I opened a bookstore. It's special because of the kindness behind it. I learned that believing in others and letting them believe in you can change everything." Questions followed, thoughtful and curious. One student asked quietly, "What advice would you give someone who doesn't think their dreams can happen?" Cassandra paused thoughtfully, choosing her words carefully. "I'd say be brave enough to hope. You never know who's waiting to help you or how one moment can change everything." When the lecture ended, Cassandra noticed David standing quietly at the back of the room, pride evident in his eyes. "You were amazing," he said as students filed out, some waving shyly at Cassandra. She approached him gratefully. "I spoke from my heart." It showed, he smiled warmly. "You inspired them." Cassandra leaned into him slightly. "You inspire me." That evening, back at their favorite bench in Rainier Green, David surprised Cassandra again, presenting a small velvet box. She stared, breathless. "David?" He knelt gently, sincerity filling his eyes. "Cass, meeting you was the greatest gift. You've taught me humility, generosity, and genuine love. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision as she nodded rapidly. "Yes, David. Yes." They kissed softly beneath Seattle's quiet sky, the city lights witnessing their quiet, perfect moment. In the following days, news of their engagement spread quickly, but this time the attention was positive, supportive. Even Daniel Cruz and Richard Evans joined in celebrating, genuinely happy for their friend. Plans for a small, meaningful wedding quickly took shape. Cassandra insisted on simplicity, focusing on authenticity over extravagance. David gladly agreed, wanting nothing more than their closest friends, family, and an honest celebration of love. On their wedding day, Rainier Green shimmered softly beneath early evening sunlight, the small gathering intimate and heartfelt. Jessica, Harold, Daniel, Richard, Tony, all the people who'd watched Cassandra and David's journey unfold stood proudly by, witnessing vows exchanged with quiet sincerity. "I promise," Cassandra began, voice steady despite joyful tears, "to always remind you that wealth means more than money, that kindness defines real success, and that dreams matter." David smiled gently, eyes warm. "And I promise to always see you clearly, support your dreams fiercely, and cherish every moment we share." Cheers erupted warmly around them, laughter and applause mingling harmoniously. Later, at a modest reception inside Chapters, Daniel raised his glass, smiling widely. "To Cassandra and David, who showed us that sometimes kindness truly is the greatest fortune." Everyone cheered heartily, and Cassandra leaned against David comfortably, savoring their shared happiness. Months passed quickly, filled with quiet evenings at Chapters, walks through Rainier Green, and shared dreams unfolding naturally. Seattle watched fondly as the couple's bookstore cafe thrived, becoming a gentle reminder of life's surprising beauty. One quiet evening, Cassandra and David sorted new arrivals at Chapters together. He paused suddenly, holding up a familiar-looking book titled A Stranger's Kindness. "It's Lily's," Cassandra smiled proudly. She finished it, published it herself. David flipped through pages, impressed. Dedicated to Cassandra Wood, who believed in a stranger's dreams. Cassandra smiled softly. She wrote about kindness, how one gesture can start everything. He nodded thoughtfully, placing the book gently back on the shelf. She learned from the best. The bell above the door jingled gently as customers entered, soft laughter filling Chapters warmly. Cassandra leaned into David, sighing contentedly. "We built something special," she whispered. He held her close, smiling tenderly. "We built something real." As night descended over Seattle, quiet happiness settled comfortably within Chapters, a gentle haven born from genuine kindness, humble dreams, and honest love. In the months following their wedding, Cassandra and David settled comfortably into a life that balanced quiet simplicity with the subtle complexities of running Chapters and managing Bates International. Together, they navigated each responsibility carefully, always making time for moments that mattered most. One crisp Seattle morning, Cassandra received unexpected news. Lily's book, A Stranger's Kindness, had gained attention from a major publishing house. Lily stood nervously in Chapters, excitement brightening her eyes. "They want to publish it nationally," Lily said, breathless. "It's all thanks to you, Cass." Cassandra hugged Lily tightly. "It's thanks to your talent and courage, Lily. I just provided a shelf." That afternoon, David arrived at Chapters to celebrate Lily's good news, bringing coffee from Bean Bloom. "I hear Seattle's newest author is on her way," David teased gently. Lily blushed, beaming happily. "It's overwhelming. You deserve every bit," David assured her sincerely. "Your story inspires others, just like Cassandra's inspired mine." After Lily left, Cassandra sat quietly with David, sipping coffee by the window. It feels surreal, she murmured, to see dreams becoming reality, not just for me, but others. David nodded thoughtfully. That's the true measure of success, isn't it? Empowering others to achieve their dreams. She smiled gently. When did you become such a philosopher? He laughed softly. Around the time a certain barista offered me a sandwich. Later, Daniel Cruz visited Chapters, smiling warmly. David, Cassandra, I have some news too. The literacy fund you both inspired is making a real difference. Donations have doubled, and small bookstores across the city are thriving. Cassandra stared in amazement. I had no idea. Your story inspires people, Daniel said simply. Genuine kindness matters. People see that now. Days later, Jessica Miller approached Cassandra with an unexpected request. Cass, I've been thinking, I'd like to help run another Chapters location, maybe near the university, to help students. Cassandra's heart swelled warmly. Jess, that's perfect. Let's make it happen. Soon, Chapters expanded thoughtfully, Jessica leading a new location designed specifically to encourage students and young writers. It quickly became a haven for creativity, kindness, and collaboration. One evening, Cassandra and David visited Jessica's new store. It bustled vibrantly with laughter, quiet study, and hopeful conversations. Jessica greeted them warmly, clearly proud. Can you believe we created this? Jessica asked excitedly. You did, Cassandra corrected warmly. You made it your own. Jessica hugged Cassandra gratefully. You showed me it was possible. Walking home later, David gently held Cassandra's hand, thoughtful. You've created something extraordinary, Cass. A community, not just a bookstore. She leaned comfortably against him. We created it together. Days turned to weeks, each moment carefully woven into their shared story. Cassandra often visited Bates International HQ, helping David implement more of her humble, practical ideas. Employees grew fond of her down-to-earth wisdom, jokingly calling her Seattle's favorite billionaire whisperer. One morning, David surprised Cassandra with a small envelope at breakfast. She eyed it suspiciously. More coupons. He laughed softly. Not this time. Inside was a plane ticket and hotel reservation. She stared, puzzled. Paris. He smiled warmly. We never had a proper honeymoon. I thought we could finally take time away. Just us. She hugged him tightly, grateful tears forming. You're perfect. A week later, wandering hand in hand through Paris's cobblestone streets, Cassandra felt truly content. Cafes buzzed quietly around them. Bookstores whispered hidden stories, and history hummed gently beneath their feet. In a small cafe overlooking the Seine, David met Cassandra's gaze gently. Did you ever imagine this? Not even close, she admitted, smiling softly. But reality is better. Returning to Seattle felt comforting, familiar, and hopeful. Their lives resumed peacefully. Days at Chapters, evenings sharing quiet meals, weekends exploring Rainier Green. One afternoon, while Cassandra sorted new book arrivals, David paused thoughtfully nearby. Can you imagine doing this forever? He asked suddenly. She glanced up, surprised. Chapters? Absolutely. Not just Chapters, he clarified gently. Us. This simple, honest life. Quiet moments, shared dreams, genuine happiness. She moved closer, placing a gentle hand on his cheek. David, forever wouldn't be long enough. He smiled softly, holding her gaze tenderly. I was thinking the same thing. That evening, sitting comfortably by their apartment window overlooking Seattle, Cassandra rested her head on David's shoulder. Content. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "How strange life is," she murmured. "One act of kindness changed everything." He nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes the smallest things have the greatest impact." Outside, the city lights glittered gently, familiar yet ever-changing. Within their quiet apartment, calm happiness wrapped warmly around them. A soft knock at the door interrupted their peaceful moment. Surprised, Cassandra opened it cautiously. Standing nervously was Richard Evans, general manager of Cascade Royale, holding a gift basket. "Richard," she asked gently. "I wanted to thank you both personally," Richard began quietly. "You reminded everyone at the hotel and me that humanity matters more than status." Cassandra smiled warmly, touched. "Thank you, Richard." As Richard left, David approached, smiling gently. "You've truly changed people, Cass." She leaned into him comfortably. "We have." The following weeks unfolded gently, each moment quiet yet meaningful. Cassandra's lectures on kindness and community expanded, resonating deeply throughout Seattle. Bates International implemented more employee-focused policies, championing simplicity and humility, gaining national attention for positive change. One evening, at Chapters, Lily returned again, holding copies of her officially published book. "It's real," Lily whispered emotionally, handing Cassandra a signed copy. "And it's all thanks to you." Cassandra hugged Lily tightly. "You did this, Lily. Your kindness inspired all of us." Lily glanced shyly toward David. "Thank you too, Mr. Bates, for believing in people like us." David smiled warmly. "People like you inspire me every day." After Lily left, David gently took Cassandra's hand, eyes sincere. "Your kindness changed more lives than you'll ever realize." She squeezed his hand warmly, smiling softly. "Maybe kindness changes us all, one small gesture at a time." They stood quietly together within Chapters, surrounded by books, dreams, and quiet hope. Outside, Seattle continued its gentle rhythm, unaware of the quiet, beautiful revolution unfolding steadily within its heart. The next spring brought new blossoms to Seattle and a new wave of challenges Cassandra and David hadn't anticipated. Early one Friday, Daniel Cruz hurried into David's office, clutching a glossy pitch deck. "Evergreen Media wants to acquire Chapters," he said without preamble. "They plan to franchise it nationwide. Aggressive timeline, lots of zeros." David frowned. "Chapters isn't for sale." "Thought you'd say that," Daniel replied, relieved. "But Evergreen is already floating rumors online claiming you're shopping the brand." By lunchtime, the rumor trended across business blogs, Billionaire to cash in on wife's charming bookstore chain. Cassandra discovered it while unpacking a shipment of poetry chapbooks. Her phone buzzed relentlessly with messages. "Is it true you're selling?" She rang David immediately. "We aren't selling, right?" "Never," he answered. "I'll handle it." That evening they met in Rainier Green to strategize under budding cherry trees. David outlined a plan, public statement, press Q&A in Chapters, transparency with their community. Cassandra listened but sensed something deeper stirring, an anxiety she hadn't seen in him for months. "Are you worried?" she asked gently. "I hate seeing your dream treated like a commodity," he admitted. "I remember a time when everything in my life felt negotiable. I don't want that for us." She squeezed his hand. "Then let's remind Seattle why Chapters exists." 2 days later, Chapters hosted its first Open Pages Festival. Instead of a press conference, Cassandra invited journalists to join local writers, high school poets, and neighborhood musicians for an all-day celebration of stories. The shop spilled onto the sidewalk with folding chairs, string lights, and a second-hand microphone that squeaked endearingly every time Jessica announced the next reader. Reporters arrived expecting corporate spin, but found Lily signing books beside Harold's vintage typewriter booth, where visitors could tap out spontaneous haiku. Tony Brooks directed traffic with surprising showmanship, wearing a Read More, Judge Less t-shirt. Even Richard Evans volunteered, handing out homemade scones labeled "Pay with a Poem." When twilight painted the sky gold, Cassandra took the tiny stage. "Chapters isn't a brand to flip," she said simply. "It's a promise we made to our community, proof that kindness can build businesses and stories can build kindness." Applause rippled down the block. David stepped up beside her. "My company won't entertain any offers for chapters," he announced. "But we will match every dollar raised today to support indie bookstores nationwide." More cheers, flashbulbs, genuine smiles. Evergreen's rumor fizzled overnight. By Monday, the headlines read, "Chapters turns corporate bid into street festival of hope." Weeks later, David invited Cassandra to Bates International's annual shareholders meeting, her first time addressing the broader corporation. Nervous, she stood in front of executives wearing pastel pumps borrowed from Jessica and notes scribbled on a bookmark. "I'm not a finance expert," she began, voice shaking. "I make coffee, recommend novels, and believe coupons can change corporations." Laughter broke the tension. "But if we measure success purely by profit, we'll miss the loyalty, creativity, and trust that actually sustain it." She told Lily's story, then Harold's, ending with Tony swapping security briefings for poetry slams. When she finished, the room stood in a rare standing ovation. Afterward, an older board member approached her, eyes shining. "I never thought of return on investment as return on inspiration." That phrase stuck. David later commissioned a downtown mural reading "Return on Inspiration" in bold turquoise letters, a daily reminder to the city of what truly mattered. Summer arrived, and with it, Chapter's second location, Jessica's campus shop, hosted a midnight release for Lily's national reprint. Students lined the block in mismatched pajamas. Cassandra introduced Lily, who read an excerpt about a mysterious traveler offered a sandwich by a brave barista. David, standing off stage, caught Cassandra's eye and mouthed, "That's us." She nodded, tears of laughter and awe mingling. After the event, they walked through the hushed quad under constellations only half visible through city glow. Cassandra kicked off her shoes to feel cool grass between her toes. "Remember the night you handed me that blueprint envelope?" she asked. "Remember the night you handed me $10 for a sandwich?" he countered. She laughed. Hard to believe the gesture started all this. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Hard to believe a billionaire still keeps that wrinkled bill in his wallet. "You don't." He pulled it out, creased, faded, but safe behind clear plastic. "Best investment I ever made." She leaned into him. "And the cheapest." They stayed like that a while, silence cradling them, night breeze rustling branches overhead. At last, Cassandra whispered, "What's next for us?" David smiled, eyes reflecting starlight. "Whatever kindness writes in the next chapter." A new chapter, open, unwritten, brimming with possibility, awaited them both. Autumn rolled into Seattle with slate blue clouds and the tang of sea salt in every gust. Cassandra loved this season, the way leaves along Rainier Green flamed crimson, the way Chapter's windows fogged while customers cradled cinnamon lattes. Yet beneath the comfort she felt a familiar itch, the pull of another dream. One rainy afternoon she found David hunched over spreadsheets in the apartment, sleeves rolled, brow furrowed. "Counting beans?" she teased. "Counting buildings," he corrected, pushing aside a tablet that displayed architectural renderings. "A historic warehouse just came on the market down by the pier. We could turn it into a community arts hub, studios, an indie theater, maybe a free library run by Chapters." Her eyes widened. "You read my mind. I was just telling Jessica the city needs a place where kids can paint and poets can shout without worrying about rent." He smiled. "Then we're aligned as usual." They toured the derelict pier building that weekend. Gulls cried overhead, waves slapped pilings beneath warped floorboards, but Cassandra saw potential in the sun-streaked beams and cavernous walls. "This could be magic," she whispered. David agreed, but the path wasn't simple. The Landmark Preservation Board would only approve adaptive reuse if the original facade and century-old gantry crane remained intact, an engineering headache. Contractors submitted bloated bids. Investors balked at the low projected profits. Even Daniel, supportive by nature, sighed. A philanthropic sinkhole, he warned. Cassandra sat with the figures late into the night, jotting numbers in the margins of Lily's paperback for luck. She and David could bankroll the project themselves, but doing so might stall Chapter's quiet expansion program. She refused to risk Jessica's campus store or the literacy fund. A week later, Jessica breezed into the apartment carrying 2 boxes of donated textbooks. Noticing Cassandra's tired eyes, she set the boxes down. "Okay, talk. What's eating you?" Cassandra spilled everything: the cost overruns, board restrictions, her fear of letting the dream die, or worse, letting it swallow their other commitments. Jessica listened, then snapped her fingers. "Crowdfunding." Cassandra blinked. "People won't fund a giant warehouse makeover." "Not if you pitch it like real estate," Jessica replied. "But if you pitch it as Seattle's home for untold stories? Readers, artists, musicians, they'll back you. Especially after the Open Pages festival stunt." That night, David embraced the idea, and within 24 hours a video appeared online, Cassandra standing in the empty pier warehouse, echoing space behind her, explaining the vision. "Help us transform this forgotten shell into Lighthouse Pier, where every voice can shine." David spoke briefly too, promising to double every dollar pledged. They set a lofty goal with a 30-day clock. Donations trickled at first $5, $10. Then Lily posted the campaign link to her growing fanbase. Bookstagrammers amplified it. A viral thread on kindness economics pushed the total higher. Within a week, they hit 50%. Within 2, the goal was surpassed. By day 30, Lighthouse Pier was overfunded by 35%. Cassandra cried in David's arms when they crossed the finish line. "People believe," she kept repeating. "People really believe." Construction began in November. Every morning, Cassandra visited the site in a hard hat plastered with Chapter's stickers. She and the foreman, Mara Soto, sketched seat risers from reclaimed planks and argued cheerfully about skylight angles. David maneuvered permits and budgets, happy to let Cassandra steer the creative helm. On a crisp evening at Chapters, Tony delivered a parcel wrapped in butcher paper. Inside, a framed photograph of Bean Bloom Coffee House, the place where everything started, shot through rain-spattered glass. On the matting, Lily had penned in curling script, "Kindness is the doorway, courage is the key." They hung it near the register where every customer could pause and remember. December blew in with silver frost. The warehouse shell had transformed, brick sandblasted clean, iron beams restored, windows yawning for pains. Mara announced the gantry crane could be repurposed as a movable stage rigging. David grinned like a child. Cassandra danced a victory twirl in steel-toed boots. One chilly night, they walked the unfinished mezzanine, breath fogging. "Imagine slam poets under that crane," Cassandra mused. "Imagine children's choirs echoing to the rafters." David wrapped his coat around them both. "I imagine you, front row, applauding louder than anyone." Snowflakes drifted through gaps in the roof, swirling in dim work lamps. First snow of the year. They stood silently, feeling the world hold its breath. He turned to her. "Cass, you once asked what's next for us. After Lighthouse Pier, after Chapters is everywhere it needs to be. What then?" She considered, smile curving. "Maybe nothing huge. Maybe just a little house near the Sound, with a garden and a dog that steals bookmarks. And maybe," he added, voice tender, "a tiny human who chews them." Her eyes widened, searching his. "I'd like that. Someday soon." They kissed beneath drifting snow, the empty warehouse echoing with gentle laughter and distant construction clatter. A lullaby of dreams under renovation. January's short, steel-gray days found Lighthouse Pier humming with progress. Glass panes glinted where drafts once whistled, and freshly poured concrete cured beneath canvas tents and portable heaters. Cassandra arrived before sunrise carrying boxes of donuts for the crew. Mara Soto saluted her with a coffee mug. 3 weeks, Cassandra. the forewoman said, voice echoing against brick. Opening night is locked in, inspectors satisfied mostly, and sound checks start Monday. Cassandra exhaled a cloud of condensation. I still wake up convinced this place is a dream. It is, Mara replied, grinning. We're just building it in brick and steel. That afternoon, David stepped out of Bates International HQ elevator and into a tense hallway. Daniel Cruz waved him into Conference B, where two board members scrutinized financial models. David, said Greta Lang, CFO of a partner firm, Lighthouse Pier projections show no direct profit for at least 8 years. Some investors want assurance your philanthropy won't dilute corporate focus. David folded his arms. It won't. Bates International allocates 2% of annual net to community ventures. The pier falls well within that cap. Greta pursed her lips. Still, headlines call Lighthouse a billionaire's vanity theater. Could be read as self-serving. Daniel cleared his throat. Greta, the project is crowdfunded. Bates only matches public contributions. Greta wasn't convinced. Optics matter. Maybe a ribbon cutting with city officials would frame it properly. David's gaze cooled. Optics aren't the goal. Access, education, creativity, that's the goal. Anyone uncomfortable is welcome to sell their shares. Silence. Greta finally nodded. Point taken. That night David found Cassandra shelving donated graphic novels at Chapters. He recounted the meeting, jaw tight. I knew some would push back, she sighed, sliding a volume into place. Change always rattles pockets. He touched her shoulder. Am I pushing too hard? She shook her head. You're reminding them corporations serve communities. If that's radical, let it be. Her steadiness calmed him more than any forecast. A late January blizzard swept through Puget Sound, dumping record snow. Seattle streets snarled. Lighthouse Pier construction paused for 48 hours. Cassandra decided to host an impromptu snow-in read-in at Chapters. Word spread via social media. Free cocoa, blankets, communal fireplace reading. By dusk, the cafe thrummed with neighbors seeking warmth. Cassandra perched on a stool, reading aloud from Lily's novel while Jessica ladled cocoa. David manned the front door, handing out thrift store mittens to shivering arrivals. Cameras captured the glow of books and steaming mugs. Next morning, local news ran a segment titled Chapter House Melts the Snowstorm. Greta's PR worries evaporated. February arrived with thawing sidewalks and final rehearsals. Lighthouse Pier's inaugural event would feature young poets, indie bands, and a short play written by Lily herself. During a technical run, the teen actor slated for the lead froze on stage, voice shaky. Lily bit her lip. Stage fright, Mara whispered. Cassandra remembered Tony Brooks' booming baritone at the poetry booth. She texted him. 20 minutes later, the security chief strode in, Broadway-sized grin lighting the house. He read Lily's script aloud, voice steady and warm. Applause erupted from volunteers. Me? Act. Tony laughed, incredulous. You're perfect, Lily insisted. Please. Tony agreed, cheeks reddening. Another kindness ripple. At last, March 3rd, a misty evening laced with gull cries and the brine scent of Elliott Bay. Lighthouse Pier glowed with marquee bulbs, salvaged gantry crane now held stage lights. Inside, seats crafted from reclaimed pews filled with donors, students, skeptics, and supporters. Mayor Delgado waited front row beside Greta Lang, curiosity replacing skepticism. Backstage, David straightened his second-best blazer, still allergic to ostentation. Cassandra adjusted a lavender scarf Jessica had knit. Nervous? She asked. Terrified, he admitted. Excited. She kissed him once. Let's shine a light. The house lights dimmed. A hush fell like velvet. Cassandra stepped to the lectern's center stage. Welcome to Lighthouse Pier, she began, voice steady yet luminous. A place built not to sell tickets but to give stories a harbor. She told the condensed tale, a sandwich offered, a trust betrayed then rebuilt, a city that chose belief over cynicism. She thanked Mara, Daniel, Tony, Lily, Richard, Jessica, and every anonymous donor. Then she gestured upward. The house lights rose slowly, revealing the original iron crane arching overhead, symbol of labor transformed into art. The audience gasped, then applauded thunderously. Lily's play unfolded tenderly. Tony delivered lines with unexpected nuance, earning standing ovations. High school poets followed, their voices ringing off brick like bells. The finale, a local band's acoustic anthem about second chances, left tears glistening on cheeks throughout the hall. Next morning, ratings soared. Seattle Times arts critic Marisol Benet wrote, Lighthouse Pier proves philanthropy and creativity aren't opposing forces, they're dance partners. Even Greta emailed, never doubt purpose again. Late that night, Cassandra and David stood alone on the pier deck, city lights shimmering across black water. Snow remnants lingered on distant rooftops. Inside, volunteers swept confetti. Outside, wind carried faint chords of an encore. David exhaled. We did it. She leaned into him. Seattle did it. He opened his wallet, carefully unfolding the crumpled $10 bill. Under marquee glow, the faded paper looked almost golden. Return on inspiration, he murmured. Cassandra rested her head on his chest, listening to waves slap pilings below. And the story keeps turning pages. They watched the bay a while, warm within an arc of light their kindness had kindled, ready for whatever chapters lay ahead. April sunlight spilled over Puget Sound, soaking the sleepy fishing cottages north of Seattle in honeygold warmth. One of those cottages, white-clapboard, jade-green shutters, now belonged to David and Cassandra. They traded the penthouse view for gull cries, saltwind, and a postage stamp garden where Cassandra coaxed herbs between seashell borders. Mornings started with quiet mugs of coffee on the small front porch, waves slapping pilings like an old friend's knock. This Saturday felt extra bright. David installed a second-hand porch swing while Cassandra arranged seed packets on a wicker table. Halfway through knotting the swing's rope, he heard her laugh, a sparkling, breathless sound he'd never tire of. Victory? He asked, wiping sawdust off his jeans. Garden blueprint, she replied, waving a doodled map. Mint near the steps, lavender beneath the window, tomatoes along the fence where neighbors can steal a few. He grinned. Steal? We'll leave baskets out. That afternoon, they drove into the city for Lighthouse Pier's first quarterly open house. Inside the lofty hall, the afternoon sun turned dust motes into confetti. A middle school jazz trio rehearsed on stage under Mara Soto's watchful eye. Jessica managed a bustling merchandise table brimming with chapbooks and band EPs. Tony Brooks, now stage manager by evening, security chief by day, balanced a headset while handing bottled water to anxious poets. Cassandra greeted volunteers and accepted lilac bouquets from Lily, who had just sold foreign rights to her debut novel. Spanish translation next spring, Lily exclaimed. David found Daniel Cruz near the soundboard. Attendance, 2,000 through the doors since morning, Daniel replied. Concession revenue all goes to youth art scholarships, as you specified. David nodded, satisfied. Watching children paint murals on plywood panels set against the brick. He felt a tug of gratitude so strong it was almost painful. None of this would exist without Cassandra's spontaneous generosity at Bean Bloom. She took his hand. Ready for the announcement? He inhaled. Ready. They stepped onto the reclaimed pine stage. The crowd quieted, recognizing them. Cassandra spoke first. Lighthouse Pier was never about a single night. It's about open doors. So today we're launching Beacon Grants. Microfunds up to $2,000 for anyone under 18 with a creative project. Applause. David continued, and Bates International will match each grant, plus provide mentorship, financial literacy, project management, marketing, lessons I had to learn the hard way. In the front row, Greta Lang wiped a discreet tear. Somewhere along the line, she transformed from skeptic to supporter, now heading Lighthouse Pier's advisory board. Back at the cottage that evening, Cassandra lit candles on the porch while David grilled salmon over cedar planks. After dinner, they lay on a picnic blanket in the yard, stars fanning across an ink-black sky. The lighthouse half a mile away blinked rhythmically, an echo of their endeavor in the city. Cassandra rested her head on David's shoulder. "Remember when we wondered what came after Lighthouse?" "I do," he murmured. "I think we found it, little ripples turning into waves." He smiled, turning to study her profile. "Speaking of waves," he reached into his jacket and produced a thin ultrasound photo. The faint outline of a tiny being curved like a comma inside an ocean of gray. Cassandra's breath hitched. "You kept the printout." "Every copy," he said. "I wanted to wait for the right moment." She placed her palm over her abdomen, tears pricking her eyes. "In 6 months, we're going to meet the smallest ripple yet." He kissed her forehead gently. "A living tribute to kindness, and maybe a bookmark chewer in training." She laughed through tears. "I already bought cloth books." They spent hours imagining names, debating middle initials under constellations. Cassandra favored literary heroes. David leaned toward mountain ranges. They agreed to let the story itself decide when the time came. May brought baby name polls at Chapters. Customers slipped suggestions into a ceramic teapot by the register. More Beacon Grant applications than expected, and a surprise letter from Bean Bloom Coffee House. The owner wanted to retire and offered first purchase rights to Cassandra and David. They toured the cafe together, sun-bleached counter, chalkboard menu still listing the chai Cassandra once spilled on her first day. "It all began here," David whispered, fingers tracing the worn wood of the table where she'd slid that $10 bill. Cassandra nodded, nostrils stinging pleasantly with cinnamon and nostalgia. "We can't let it vanish." Within weeks, Bean Bloom reopened as Kindred Grounds, co-managed by former baristas and funded by the Beacon program. The grand reopening banner read, "A cup of warmth, a dash of courage, a flood of stories." On launch day, the first customer was an older man in a navy coat who hugged a frayed backpack. Cassandra greeted him with free coffee and fresh banana bread, paying forward the moment that changed her life. She tucked a coupon for Lighthouse Pier events into his palm. "For later," she said. He blinked, surprised by such kindness. She recognized that look well. June's long twilight found David and Cassandra once more on the pier deck after an open mic night that raised funds for a refugee writers collective. Warm wind ruffled Cassandra's sundress. Distant fairy horns serenaded their silence. She rested his palm on the soft rise of her stomach. The baby kicked, a feather-light motion that made them both laugh. David whispered, awed, "Our story keeps turning pages. I don't want to miss a single line." She replied, cheeks glowing, "Neither do I. Let's promise to keep writing, one act of kindness at a time." They kissed under lighthouse gleam, steady, unwavering. And far below, waves applauded against barnacled pilings as though the whole sound was busy turning its own page to see what kindness would write next. August crept over the Pacific Northwest in a hush of golden mornings and warm, lavender-tinted dusks. Cassandra's cottage garden had sprouted basil and sunflowers, and the rosemary hedge now brushed her knees as she paced slow circles each evening, feeling the baby's gentle tumbles inside her. David read construction updates aloud on the porch swing, Beacon Grant murals brightening underpasses, Kindred Grounds adding a pay-what-you-can shelf, Jessica's campus chapter hosting its first 24-hour readathon. Their world kept expanding, fed by ripples they scarcely noticed starting. One Friday, Mara Soto phoned David from Lighthouse Pier. "You two should get here fast." Her voice trembled with something between excitement and disbelief. They arrived to find the hall transformed into a labyrinth of easels and light. Hundreds of postcards hung on twine strung from beam to beam. Mara handed Cassandra a note, an exhibition of gratitude. "Tony." Visitors flowed beneath the postcards, reading aloud. Each card told a small story. "Because of your grant, my play premiered at the Fringe Fest. Kindred Grounds hired me after I aged out of foster care. Your coupon lecture made me debt-free." Cassandra clutched David's arm. "All this." Tony Brooks, still wearing a headset, strode over. "We asked people to mail Lighthouse one line about how kindness touched them. 6 weeks, 1,500 cards from 9 countries. Lily stepped forward with a final envelope. "For you." Inside lay the original $10 bill, framed now on parchment etched with Lily's calligraphy, investment yield, infinite. Cassandra's throat closed in a happy ache. David pulled her close as applause rippled through the crowd. The baby kicked as if clapping too. That night, back at the cottage, the couple tucked the frame onto the mantel beside shells from their first beach walk. Rain drummed softly. Cassandra shifted, wincing. "Little one's restless tonight." David knelt, murmuring, "Easy, Firefly." Mountain names had lost to literary ones. They'd settled on Firefly as a belly nickname after a Ray Bradbury passage. 2 hours later, her water broke. The world whirled into flashing highway lights, hospital corridors, and deep breathing time to David's whispered chapter titles: Hope, Wonder, Home. At dawn, under pink streaks of first light, a wailing miracle arrived, 10 tiny fingers, a living bookmark between past and future. "Welcome, Eliana Rosemary Bates," Cassandra breathed, tears sparkling. In the waiting room, their tribe assembled, Jessica clutching knit booties, Mara and Daniel delivering croissants, Tony reciting slam poem lullabies, Lily presenting a cloth-bound journal titled Eliana's First Library. Richard Evans sent flowers shaped like stacked books, and Greta Lang emailed an official board resolution granting Eliana lifetime honorary stock value measured in library cards. Days later, the new family returned to the cottage. Sun filtered through curtains, laying gold stripes on floorboards. David paused at the doorframe, Eliana asleep against his chest. "Ready?" he asked Cassandra. She looked around, the swing, the herb garden, the distant wink of the lighthouse. Every chapter so far felt impossible. Yet here we are. She brushed a fingertip over Eliana's cheek. Our kindness revolution just added its smallest recruit. Evenings found them strolling Rainier Green with a stroller, strangers smiling as they passed. Some recognized them, others simply sensed calm generosity in the glances they shared. Kindness, once a quiet experiment, had become a habit caught not taught. On the first anniversary of Lighthouse Pier's opening, crowds gathered again. Eliana gurgled in Jessica's arms while Cassandra read a new mission statement: Beacon 2 mobile story vans to bring books, art kits, and microstage platforms to rural towns. David announced Bates International would supply maintenance and fuel. Volunteers cheered. Children traced their names on sign-up sheets. When dusk settled, Cassandra stood on the pier deck. Eliana bundled snugly. Water slapped pilings, carrying city lights across its dark mirror. David joined her, wrapping a blanket around them both. "Page break?" he asked. "Page turn," she corrected, smiling. He glanced at the lighthouse beam sweeping across black water. "Think the world can keep up?" She leaned into him. Kindness travels fast. Behind them, lighthouse windows glowed, each pane a tiny stage where voices once silenced now soared. Ahead of them, honey-colored waves lapped steady rhythms, promising more chapters, more ripples, more readers ready to join the tale. And somewhere inside that gentle cradle of night, Eliana stirred, a fledgling giggle escaping. It sounded remarkably like the turning of a fresh, blank page, waiting for the next line only kindness could write.